Good morning, everyone. Namaste. Welcome. My name's Katie Rose. I'm so happy to see you here today. Welcome to the Women's Wisdom Ayurveda webinar. It's really lovely to see you here. I'm just going to wait a moment and see if we have a few more people to let into the space. And for now, I'll ask you just to find a comfortable seat and settle into a more meditative or quiet space. So just taking a moment to sit, to take a couple of deep breaths, to bring yourself into your physical body. You might want to gently close down your eyes, relax your neck and shoulders, relax your jaw. Just feel yourself settling in. Those of you who are with me live, if you're able to join with your camera on, I really love that. It just makes it so much more of an interactive experience if I can see you. But if you can't, I totally understand. A very warm welcome to those of you who are here with me live and those of you watching the replay. I know many registered and aren't able to make it live today, so welcome if you're watching the replay as well. Please gently close down your eyes, take a couple of deeper breaths. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm sitting. I'm here in Sydney, Australia, which is Gadigal land belonging to the Eora Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge my own teachers, particularly my Ayurveda and yoga teachers who have set me on this path. And I'd like to invite you to acknowledge your teachers, anyone that has brought you to this place today. Could be a yoga teacher, could be a spiritual teacher, could be simply a friend. Anyone who has performed the role in your life of guide or mentor, just taking a moment to acknowledge those people now. And then finally, acknowledging the wisdom keepers from our own personal culture and ancestry. So wherever you are from, whatever your personal heritage and lineage, there will have been some wisdom keepers, some wise women in that line. And we ask them to be present with us and we acknowledge their support and their wisdom. I'm going to say a very short Sanskrit prayer which invokes the energy of our teachers and guides and acknowledges all those who come before us on this path. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshvara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I bow down in reverence to all my teachers, that teacher which is this life I have been given and continue to lead, that teacher which is all hardship and difficulty on my path, that teacher who is nearby, and that teacher who is beyond all this, loving and supreme. Namaste. Beautiful. So for those of you who are with me live, I'd love to know how much you know about Ayurveda. So if you're able to pop in the chat, 0 being I'm a brand new beginner, which is beautiful. 1 being I know a little bit, but not much. And 2 being more kind of at the expert level. Sandra, I can see your note that you don't have audio. Can everyone else hear me okay? Yeah, so I think the audio is working. It might be something from your end, Sandra. Maybe you've got Bluetooth connected or something like that. Sometimes that happens. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm just getting a feel for where you guys are at. Lovely, 1s and 2s. Gorgeous. All right, so not so many brand new beginners. I'm guessing there'll be a few beginners listening to the replay, and I can see a couple of 0s coming in as well. So the beautiful thing about Ayurveda is it really speaks to all levels of understanding and knowledge. And one of the things that often happens when we first hear about Ayurveda or get a little bit interested into it and a lot of people come to Ayurveda through yoga, not always, but that's very common, is the doshas, the constitutional types. It's like we learn about Ayurveda and then straight away it's like, oh, what's your dosha? What's your constitutional type? And this can be a bit of it's very beautiful and very useful, but it can also create a lot of rules and kind of ideologies that we have to follow. Once you know what your type is, your constitution, then there comes a whole list of things that you're meant to do and not meant to do, and it can all feel quite kind of restrictive. I'm really interested in Ayurveda taught in the feminine form, which is why I teach for women specifically. And for me, what this means is looking at the pathway of healing in a way that is very expansive and open and almost web-like rather than linear. So when we get into lots of kind of rules and regulations, like you have to do this and you shouldn't do that, and this is your type and you should follow this protocol, that's what I think of as a very masculine model. And I'm not talking about men and women here. I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about the energy of the masculine, divine, feminine, and sacred masculine. And we need both. We need the masculine and the feminine. Both are important in all human beings in order for there to be the yin and the yang, if you like. In Sanskrit, we would call that the Ida and Pingala. And so within all of us, that shows up at different times in different ways. But what I notice very often happens in Ayurveda is that we get very stuck in this masculine way of thinking, which is, I want an outcome and I need a straight pathway to follow to get to that outcome, and I want to be told what to do. So let's say it could be, for example, your gut health. Maybe you're having trouble digesting and you've got some symptoms around, could be like IBS, loose stool and then constipation, and this whole kind of journey with gut health. It's very common for many people. And so we want to be given a system. We want to be told, okay, eat this, do this, exercise at this time, take these herbs, and it will be fixed. That's a very Western medical model way of looking at health and healing. It's like, I've got a problem, I'm going to go to an expert, or I'm going to go to a system, or I'm going to go to a pharmacist or a doctor or a herbalist or an Ayurvedic practitioner, and they're going to tell me how to fix myself. And it's going to be like a roadmap or a pathway that I can follow. And in this way, we sort of follow the very masculine or Western system of medicine practice within an Ayurvedic framework. And what I've noticed is when we get too fixated on the doshas, which are the constitutional types, that can really take us into that pathway of protocol and sort of lists and rules and regulations. So for that reason, the doshas, the constitutional types, are not the place that I start when I'm teaching Ayurveda. They absolutely do come in, they are relevant, and I run a whole training program, which you guys will definitely hear more about, that we do go into the doshas in a lot of detail. But for me, they're not the foundational pillar. So what I want to explore with you today is 3 pillars that I consider to be the foundation of Ayurveda. And from those 3 pillars, that we can then learn about our doshas or our individual constitutional types within the context of a more holistic or more divine feminine, more web-like realm of healing, rather than this kind of lists of do's and don'ts and protocols that can feel quite strict and restrictive. So just to talk about the doshas very briefly, because I know lots of people, especially those of you who are new to Ayurveda, will be interested in this. I do have a quiz that you can take on my website, and when I send you out the replay of this recording of the webinar, the link to do the quiz will also be there. So absolutely, you can go and find out what your dosha is and get some ideas and tips about things that you can do to support yourself, keeping that in mind. So it's not that we're dismissing the dosha side of things, but that's not our primary focus for today. To speak very briefly about the doshas or the constitutional types, there are 3. There is Pitta, which is fire, there is Vata, which is air, and there is Kapha, which is earth and water in combination. And all of us have all 3, just like I spoke about. We all have the masculine and the feminine within us. We also all have a balance of the 3 different constitutions, or you could say the 5 elements. But we'll have one that is stronger. So for example, I'm a pitta person. I've got a lot of fire in me. So I'm very driven and I'm quite impatient. I can tend towards getting frustrated, but I'm also really good at focusing and getting things done. That's just a very brief kind of snapshot. So if you're interested in that doshas piece, as I said, I will be sending you out a link to do the quiz. You can find out a little bit more. And when you get your quiz results, you'll be given some ideas about things you can do specifically to support that. Now I'm going to move into the 3 pillars, which is the main content I wanted to share with you today. Before I do, I can see that Sandra's got her hand raised. I think, are you having some sound issues, Sandra? No, you've just got a question? Just bring yourself off mute, my love, because I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I had some sound issues, but now everything is okay.
Wonderful.
So,
I'm so glad. Brilliant.
okay. Thank you.
All right. So our 3 pillars are, and I'm going to write these words in the chat for those of you who aren't familiar: Shakti, Bhakti, and Sadhana. And for me, these are the 3 foundational pieces for Ayurvedic practice. So let me backtrack a little bit and say something about what Ayurveda is for those of you who don't know. Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. They're very closely linked. It's closely related to the Indian subcontinent. It's really the indigenous health and healing system of India. And it covers, the word Ayurveda literally means the wisdom of a life well lived. So Veda is wisdom and Aya is life. So it's life wisdom. And there's lots of different ways we can think about this. We can think about the physical body. We can think about our sort of energy. We can think about things like intuition, emotions, feelings, the mind, and how our mental health is. And all of these different facets and aspects make up what Ayurveda is. So it's a huge, rich, deep, really profound set of teachings that can really support our health and wellness on every level, and a really, truly holistic framework. It's been around for thousands of years. There are many ancient scriptures that follow and support the teachings of Ayurveda. So the things I'm sharing with you today, just to be really clear, don't come from me. They come from scripture. They come from ancient Vedic teachings. They come from my teachers and my teachers' teachers. And of course, I've got some of my own interpretation and my own spin and my own ideas, but this isn't a new age set of teachings. It's not something that's been recently invented. It goes back thousands of years. Personally, I'm really fortunate that I've been able to study with some of the best teachers in the world for a really long time. My main teacher, who is a beautiful Indian woman named Maya Tiwari, she's written a couple of very well-known books about Ayurveda. She is a Vedic nun and she's been teaching Ayurveda her whole life. And I've been her student for 25 years now. I've spent a lot of time with her in her ashram and traveled all over the world supporting her and learning from her and being mentored by her. So I feel very privileged to be part of a true lineage and a very authentic line of these teachings. And as you, even just by being in this space with me and for this moment sitting in the seat of student, you have become, just for a moment, a part of that lineage as well. And that's such a beautiful thing. You know, at the beginning of our session, we took the time to acknowledge our teachers and to acknowledge all the people that come before us in sharing these teachings. And as we do that, what we do, it's very ceremonial, actually. It's very powerful. We step into the lineage itself, because when we remember there were teachers that came before us and they had teachers and they had teachers, and some people went through great hardship to share these teachings. What we do in that memory, in that moment of acknowledgement, is we step into the humble role of the student, which is where I hope I always find myself, but also the lineage itself. So even by just being here, even if you're just here for this 1 hour with me, and that's the extent of it, for a moment, you've had a taste of the nectar of being part of that lineage. And it really is such a beautiful thing, because what you feel in that moment is the wishes of all the teachers that came before for our health and for our wellness. You know, we have it so lucky these days. We literally can get on the internet and find so many different things for free. And we Google, you know, Ayurveda fix for my gut health or whatever it might be that you want to know. And, you know, rolls and rolls of information come up, and it's really accessible. But what we have to remember is, for hundreds and hundreds of years, even when I first started teaching this stuff 25 years ago, you know, the internet was in its infancy, these teachings were very precious. They were very, you know, to receive the knowledge, to be in the company of a true teacher was something that really invited great reverence. And I think the internet's a brilliant thing. I mean, obviously, I'm here offering a webinar. I'm very excited by the potential of technology. But I also think that we sometimes lose something of the reverence and the feeling of respect almost for the teachings when they're just so easily available all the time. So something I try to remember in my own practice, and I really want to invite you to think about as well, is just slowing down enough to remember and to realize that these teachings are very precious, and that many women have struggled in different ways so that we can have such easy access to them, and that we're very fortunate to be in this position where, you know, it's all available to us so easily. The thing that we struggle with in our lives at this time in particular, and the great scripture Bhagavad Gita, one of the great yogic scriptures, points to this. In Gita, we're told that the particular challenge for the time that we live in right now is focus. And I think that's really interesting. You know, lots of different eras have had different challenges. Could be war, could be famine, could be all kinds of different things. But, you know, our challenge is the challenge of focus. And if you really stop to think about it, I don't know about you, but I feel every year my focus just gets a little bit more eroded, a little bit, it's a little bit harder for me to concentrate and to be really engaged with one thing. And I notice as a practitioner of meditation and as a teacher of meditation that we find it harder and harder to sit in quiet stillness because we're so used to stimulation all the time. And again, a lot of that has to do with technology and the way that we use technology. So this piece around focus is really critical in terms of how we absorb the teachings and how we're able to listen to them. And I would add to that application. So we, like I said before, we have all the knowledge, right? You can Google almost anything and you can find out how to do whatever it is that you want to do. Where we struggle is doing the thing. Like if I asked any one of you, oh, what should I do to improve my sleep? You'd have so much advice. Keep your mobile phone out of your bedroom, use some lavender oil, turn screens off before bed, you know, drink a herbal tea, etc., etc., etc. We know what we're meant to be doing. We're very well educated. But do we do those things? Or do we go to bed too late, get overtired, you know, watch TV until we start falling asleep, forget to put the cat out and get woken up in the middle of the night? I don't know, whatever it might be. We're not very good at following the advice that we know is sage advice. And we could say the same thing. I used sleep as an example, but we could also speak about food. We could speak about mental health, you know, so many different things. And so in the work that I share, one of the things that I'm really keen to do as much as possible, and I'll try to get as much of this in today's session as I can, is give you really practical things that you can do that will actually have you implement the work we're talking about. So this piece is the pillar of sadhana. Sadhana, S-A-D-H-A-N-A. Sadhana means, and it's our first pillar. I don't think I wrote them in order in the chat. Let me see. No, I put sadhana at the bottom, but I'm going to start with sadhana. Sadhana means conscious, daily, spiritual practice. Conscious, daily, spiritual practice. Now, sadhana is very closely linked to mindfulness. So if you've ever thought about mindfulness as a subject or tried to practice more mindfulness in your life, you're very close to understanding what sadhana is all about. It's about bringing true presence and focus to whatever it is that you're doing. So a good example is your first cup of tea in the morning, okay, or it could be coffee when you wake up. Now, you can be kind of bleary-eyed and getting out of bed and put the coffee machine on or put the kettle on to make yourself a cup of tea, and it can all happen very much on autopilot. And then you drink the coffee or you drink the tea, and I mean, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I have a cup of tea in the morning and I don't even remember whether I've had one or not. You know, it's like, oh, did I drink that tea, or have I left it and it's gone cold somewhere? So this is the opposite of sadhana. This is where we're just distracted and busy and doing 1,000 things at once, and there isn't really a presence or a sense of attention to what we're doing. The very other end of the tea analogy would be the Japanese tea ceremony. Some of you might be familiar with this, where it's the most exquisite and beautiful ritual. It's literally a ceremony. And, you know, the tea is poured with such care. There's meditation that happens. The way that you lift the cup, that you smell the tea, that you taste the tea is all important. And it's all a meditative experience. Now, I'm not saying that we can do that every morning in our busy lives, you know, as we get up in the morning before we get ready to do whatever, all the things that we have to do. But there is a beautiful middle ground where we can be somewhere between complete mindlessness, where we don't even remember if we drank the tea or not, and the ceremonial, the Japanese tea ceremony. For example, you could get up in the morning a few minutes earlier than you usually do, and you could take time to light a candle, and you could sit quietly and drink your coffee or your tea, and maybe read a little bit of poetry or an inspiring quote, or take some time to journal, or just simply, depending on where you live, sit out and look at the view or watch the sun come up. This is such a beautiful sadhana. It's such a beautiful way to start your day. I always think that the quickest and easiest, well, I'll give you two great sadhanas that you can do almost any time. One, light a candle with reverence and with a moment of pause, a sacred pause. What a beautiful action that takes less than a minute to just become involved in or enveloped in a sacred mood. In Sanskrit, we call that bhav, the feeling of something sacred, just for a moment. The second one is taking a few deep breaths, and that really is available to you anytime, any place. That in itself is a sadhana. So sadhana happens when we make something into a spiritual experience. Another beautiful example of sadhana is food preparation and how we eat our food. So my teacher, Maya Tiwari, often would tell us, yes, what you eat is important, and Ayurveda does have a lot of rules and regulations about what to eat and how to prepare the food. One of the things that I've included for you, when I send you out the replay, you'll get a website page that's also got some extra resources in it. So I've created for you a little self-care booklet and some instructions about what herbs and spices you can use at different times, and also a recipe for khichdi, which is a beautiful lentil rice combination. It's a real staple in Ayurvedic food, beautiful cleansing dish, and the recipe for that is in there as well. So one of the things that we do in Ayurveda is we are very interested in what we're eating, but my teacher used to say how you eat is as important as what you eat. So, you know, slowing down, tasting the food, being mindful enough to not overeat, not being too distracted when you're eating. Like, again, this idea of the sadhana cup of tea can also be extended into a sadhana meal. You might even make a silent blessing before you start to eat over your food, and a moment of, even just a moment of gratitude. You know, at the moment we're watching such horrific scenes unfolding in Palestine, and you know, literal scenes of starvation. Just a moment to be grateful for the food that is in front of us. Such a powerful practice, and that in itself is sadhana. And then we can extend sadhana into so many things. Perhaps you go to the gym and exercise. Perhaps you go for a walk each day. I've got a couple of dogs, so sometimes I walk my dogs. Mostly I try to get my older sons to do it, but sometimes I get that job. And so turning those things into a sadhana as well. You know, the things that you have to do, particularly the things that you have to do on repeat, even cleaning your house. gardening. These things can become sadhana if we do them with care. It's about the attention and the care and the gratitude that we bring. You know, it sounds so silly, but taking your garbage out could become a sadhana if the process of taking the garbage out has to do with you being so grateful and acknowledging that someone's going to take my trash away. You know, I live in a place where I can just put rubbish in the bin, put it outside, and it miraculously gets removed and I don't have to deal with it. That's a sadhana, just noticing and being in a mood of gratitude and mindfulness. So that's our first pillar. And almost everything that we do in Ayurveda beyond that begins with sadhana. The opposite of sadhana is just doing something because you've been told to do it and kind of going through the rites and rituals without actually being fully present. So if you were raised in a particular religion, for example, and this won't be relevant for all of you, but I know some of you will relate to this, and you were made as a child to go to church or to do certain, rituals or ceremonies, but they weren't very meaningful to you. That's the opposite of sadhana. Like, it looks like on the outside, oh, we're at church and we're praying, or we're, taking communion or whatever it might be. But if you're just moving through the motions, then the sadhana is not present. Sadhana is a mood and it's a way of being and it's an attitude. It's got very little to do with what's happening on the outside. Even another good example of a beautiful sadhana practice is to set a table for a meal. So, rather than just, I've got 5 children, so meal times in my house are often pretty hectic. But rather than just kind of throw the food on the table and everyone comes in and they're noisy and it's all kind of messy. And, I try to, again, light a candle, maybe put a flower on the table, set the meal nicely. So even if it's a takeaway meal, even if it's nothing special like soup, just this idea that we bring some reverence to what we're doing. So that's sadhana. And we come back to that as an anchor point in Ayurveda again and again and again in all that we do. The second pillar that I want to talk about, we've already touched on really, is Shakti. And Shakti is the divine feminine in action. Shakti is the goddess. Now, as Western people, we very often have an association with the idea of Shakti as sort of a bit wishy-washy and vague and floaty and sort of, like a little fairy floating through the sky, and this sort of goddess idea that's like ultra feminine and maybe even a little bit vulnerable. In the Ayurvedic tradition, Shakti is Mother Nature, and there is a huge amount of force and power and energy in Shakti. So Shakti is the power that enables you to birth a baby, enables the oceans to move and have their tides and have their ebbs and flows, trees to grow, food to grow, storms to happen. There's nothing fairy-like or kind of floaty about Shakti. She is all powerful. She's the primordial essence of Mother Nature. And the amazing thing about Shakti energy is that it is both highly organized and very chaotic, which I know many women can relate to. I certainly can. So, there's a side to us as women that we're very capable of great organization. One of my sons came out of his bedroom the other day and he was looking for something. He said, "Mum, I know it's going to be just right in front of me when you walk in and look, but I can't find my whatever it was." And I walked into his room, of course, there it was straight away. And he's like, "Yeah, mum eyes." Like, you just see things in a way that's kind of organized and sorts through. And, we're very good at sort of categorizing and preempting and being in that role of caretaker, and that often takes a lot of organization. On the other hand, the Shakti energy is also quite chaotic. Like, when you look in nature, you'll see symmetry and you'll see great beauty, but you'll also see disruption and disturbance, and that things, like I said at the very beginning of our session, don't always go in a straight line. So we have to learn to become comfortable with both. And one of the things that we're not very good at in our Western culture is being out of control or dealing with chaos. We've created our lives to be in such a way that we're very able to control what's happening at all times. You know, if you feel too hot, you turn on the air conditioning. If you feel too cold, you turn on a heater. If you're hungry, you open the fridge and you eat. If you're thirsty, you turn on the tap and you drink. We're very used to having our needs immediately met, but also not being comfortable, not being in control. It's a very strong part of our cultural identity that we're autonomous and we get to choose what we do with whom and when. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's a beautiful thing. But Shakti, the energy of the goddess, has an energy of the unknown, has an energy of chaos as well as order, right? It's like two sides of the yin and the yang, again, two sides of the coin. And so one of the teachings in Ayurveda is actually, can we get used to, and a lot of this has to do with the way our minds work, can we get okay with the idea that we're not going to be in control of everything? Things aren't always going to go the way that we want. Life is going to throw some surprises at us. And if you're here for health reasons, like if you're someone who is working through, again, could be digestive, could be hormonal. A lot of women I work with are heading towards perimenopause and menopause. If you're working through those types of things, part of what you need to know, and part of what Ayurveda teaches us, is there isn't a straight line to healing. You don't get to just decide that you want to be rid of these symptoms or that you want this particular thing to change and it happens overnight. Now, sometimes we can do a sort of metaphorical band-aid over symptoms and we can get rid of symptoms. So let's say, for example, there's some hormonal issues for a woman. Very often what a mainstream doctor or medical advice will be is take contraceptive pill, and it will just kind of band-aid or mask over the hormonal dysregulation. And that can work for a while, but what often happens later on, or even immediately for some women, is side effects. You know, it's a temporary fix and it's a symptomatic fix. It's not a fix for the root problem. In Ayurveda, there's a beautiful image that I think of a lot when I'm thinking about the journey of healing, and it's the image of a root growing deep into the earth, and the root is disease or dysfunction. Now, some things are, you know, when you're weeding, when you're picking up, you know, weeds from the garden, sometimes they're super easy to pick up. Like, you know, the roots are very on the surface, and maybe it's rained, the ground's a little bit wet, and you can literally just kind of pull everything up. Those kinds of things would be when there is something happening with your health, but it's a very low level and easy to fix situation, right? So there's no deep roots. We're just kind of, the weeds are easy to remove. Some diseases, some dysfunctions, some challenges, and often with hormonal ones, it is like this, go a lot deeper, and there can be like a deep tap root, right? And when we pull too hard, we just snap off the plant that's growing, but the root is still there. And this is what happens when we're taking medicines, particularly pharmaceutical medicines, that are only dealing with symptom. The cause, that root, is growing deeper and deeper and deeper. In Ayurveda, we call it the dhatus, or the tissues. It's like the layers of yourself until it gets really deeply embedded. And this applies not only to our physical health, but also to mental health. So you might have some passing anxiety, right? And it kind of comes and it goes and it's manageable, and you've got some tools for dealing with it. Those roots are fairly temporary and you can do that weeding quite easily. If it starts to take hold and it becomes a deeper depression, or your brain chemistry is really not functioning well, or you're experiencing a deep grief or a profound sadness, the roots are growing deeper and deeper. And then we have some choices around how we extract that root from the dhatus, the tissues, or, you know, the soil. Now, what Ayurveda recommends, the analogy that is used, is instead of just pulling and pulling or ripping the plant off at the top, but the root is still there, we slowly start to excavate space around that root, right? So if you had to dig up a big root, what you would do is you'd start digging a little bit wider out, and then you'd dig deep, and then you'd circle in, and maybe you'd add a bit of water. You try and soften things up, and you also wouldn't be in too much of a hurry, because when you're in a hurry, you just pull that plant off, or you you know, you literally can't get in and get the root out. You just band-aid it, pour some concrete on top or something. These aren't solutions. So when we're tending in the manner of Shakti to our health, to our wellness, and when I talk about health, I don't just mean physical body, it includes physical symptoms, but also emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, especially if it's something deeply ingrained, deeply embedded, deeply, you know, like a strong root. We circle in slowly. We start tending to the soil around, we dig deep, and it takes time. It's a healing journey. This is why we talk about the journey of, you know, excavating this root. Now, we can have moments in that feel like deep breakthrough. And I'm sure you've all had those moments, like a sort of dark night of the soul or an epiphany or a realization. And that's like a moment when we really do pull out one of the roots and it just comes out and we're healed. That can happen. Time is a very interesting thing. Sometimes things happen slowly and they take a lot of time and they're very arduous. And sometimes, you know, a switch can just go and you're like, you know what? Enough is enough. You could be in a job that you don't like for 20 years. And then one day you go into work and you're like, I'm done, finished, right? And you call it, or it could be a relationship. It could be a bad habit. It could be an addiction. Some people have struggled and battled with addiction for years and years and years. And then at some point they just go, I'm done, no more. So that can happen. That's one way. But more common, more likely, and, you know, we love that way because it feels so easy, right? Wouldn't it be great tomorrow to just wake up and be completely free of addictions and completely free of bad relationships and bad choices, and that switch has just flipped? That's enlightenment. But in the absence of that happening, and you will have had moments of that in your life, we all have, mostly what we have to do is get our hands dirty and get in there and dig the hole and add some water and dig a bit more and tug a bit and dig and get some friends to help us. And this is the process. And what happens on that journey, in my experience, and also in the experience I've had working with hundreds of women in Ayurveda, is it actually becomes quite enjoyable. We start to enjoy the process of healing. It's not all about the end result of pulling up those roots. It's about being in the sadhana, being in the moment of enjoying the gardening process, enjoying the healing journey. And this is really what it means to be having a human experience, to be in that process. So that's the Shakti piece. A little bit of chaos, a little bit of order, becoming more comfortable with not having control over everything, having a longer term vision around what healing looks like, and circling around in a slower process to pull the roots of disease, to pull the roots of ill health out from a very deep place, rather than these kind of band-aid remedies that are so prevalent. We're very conditioned in our culture to want things very quickly. You know, you got a headache, you take a Panadol. And I'm not saying I never take Panadol, I do sometimes, but in a deeper healing journey, the fix is rarely that quick. It's usually a little bit more work. So that's the Shakti piece. And of course, there's so much more I could say on that. I'm just giving you guys a bit of a taster today. And then, you know, with the Shakti piece, I'll just say this briefly. I have a pathway that I've learned from my teachers of 7 different stages in that journey of healing, that journey of digging up the root, that include all kinds of different things like diet, looking at sleep, looking at your daily rhythms, looking at your individual dosha, your constitution, looking at your menstrual cycle and hormones, herbal protocols, different self-care practices like abhyanga or massage. So there's lots and lots of different things that make up that process of healing. And in the full Ayurveda training that I run, which I'll be letting you guys know about when you receive the replay of this training, this webinar, we go into those in a lot more detail. So that's, I'm giving you a taste today, but obviously there's a lot more detail of exactly how that process happens. Now, the last pillar that I want to share with you is the pillar of Bhakti. And I'll talk about this for just a few moments. And then I'd love to open up and see if anyone has any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So Bhakti is the pillar of sacred devotion. It's the pillar of connection to a higher power. And without the element of Bhakti in our Ayurvedic practice, we really lose some of the magic of Ayurveda. It is possible to practice Ayurveda without the Bhakti component. Like, we can look at herbs and, diet and different protocols around sleep, and we'll still get a lot of benefit. But at the end of the day, if we're really practicing the wisdom of a life well lived, which is what Ayurveda is, it's very closely linked to connection to source, connection to a higher power. Now, some people might call that God. I think God can be a very difficult word for a lot of people, and it kind of creates ideas that aren't necessarily what I'm talking about. We could also say goddess. I really just think of it as some kind of energetic or personified experience that is outside of you and your ego. So really what Bhakti means is that you acknowledge and accept that you're not the boss of the entire universe. That's really what Bhakti is. And I know that might sound quite comical, but the truth is that many of us, most of us, and I certainly have lots of moments of this myself, behave as if we are the boss of the entire universe. We expect things to go a certain way. We think that we're in control. We make plans. John Lennon so famously said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I think about that often when the wheels fall off with all the plans that I've made. And so what we have, this beautiful word in Sanskrit, it's one of my favorite words. I'll pop it in the chat. It's swaha. And what swaha means is to surrender, to let go, having tried your best. So we don't really have a direct English translation for this word. A lot of Sanskrit words are quite subtle, and when we translate them into English, we don't have a word. Swaha is like, I've tried really hard. I really want this thing. I'm putting everything into it. And at the same time, I understand the outcome isn't up to me. So a good example of swaha is if you go for a job application for a job you really want, right? So maybe you write a great covering letter and you prepare your CV and you get a good night's sleep and you wear the right clothes and you go for the interview and you do a good interview, you do your very best. And then at the end of it, so you've done everything you can do to get this job. At the end of it, you may get the job, you may not. It's actually not in your hands. There might be a better candidate. It might not be the right time for you. And so we have to say swaha. It is what it is. I've done my best and now I let it go. And it doesn't mean, and often there's a misinterpretation that it means don't do anything, don't even try. It's definitely not that. It's like you put everything, and you can apply the same model of swaha to our health, actually. And this is really strongly where Bhakti and health link in. We don't always get to choose. Sometimes you have a health condition. It might even be a terminal health condition. And it's not because of anything you did or, something that, some sort of lifestyle choice. Healthy people get cancer, and people that live very unhealthy lives maintain good health. Life isn't always 2 + 2 = 4. And this is where the Bhakti comes in, where we just go, you know what? It just is what it is. We're not in control of everything. And when we do that, what happens is, according to the teachings of Ayurveda, there's a huge relief. Because instead of feeling like we're responsible for everything, and this is what often New Age spirituality teaches us, like, you can manifest whatever you want and you can reject and throw away whatever you don't want. Well, life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you get the thing you want, and certainly visualizing it and imagining it and doing all the things to make it happen will help. But sometimes it's just not for you. And sometimes what you think is for you and would be best for you actually isn't. And so there's a point at which we say, I surrender, I hand it over to a higher power, I let go. And this is the Bhakti element. And in doing so, we hold firm in our hearts and minds that there is a benevolent force that's looking after us, that we are cared for, and that this is happening for a reason, even if we can't see it what it is right now, that has our best and highest interest. For me personally, prayer and actually being in some kind of dialogue with source or with the divine or with the universe, whatever you want to call it, is a really important part of bhakti. I also like to chant japa meditation, which is using mantra and mala beads. In the self-care ebook that you'll get, that is part of this webinar, you'll get it for free. There's instruction for doing japa meditation, and that's a really beautiful style of meditation that helps you connect to this idea of bhakti, this surrendering to a higher power. And so for me, that's the last pillar of the three that really is the foundation of what Ayurveda is all about, in the feminine form, in the form in which I practice it and teach it. And then, we can look at the different elements of ourselves, the different parts of who we are. We can look at different practices and protocols, and we can look at the constitutional individual dosha or constitutional type under that umbrella of those three pillars. So I hope that all made sense. I will make sure that there are some notes for you, as well as all the resources that I said. So if you're interested in this and it sort of piqued your interest, I want to give you enough support materials that you can go away and at least try a few different things in your life, even if you don't continue and do more studies with me. I will be giving you the opportunity to join me in Ayurveda Goddess, which is my full certified program. And at the moment, I'm running a 30% discount on that. So I will send you out details of how you can join. It's inexpensive. Nothing that I do is very expensive, because I don't believe in overcharging for these teachings. I really think it's important that they're accessible, and it's been part of my mission to make sure that these teachings can get into the hands of as many people as possible. Over 400 women have done my Ayurveda Goddess training now. So it's been a beautiful journey that so many women have benefited from. And yeah, I would love for you to join me inside that container. But even if you don't, I want to make sure that you get enough today that you can add a few things into your life, add some sadhana, add some bhakti, and add an understanding of the way that Shakti, or the divine feminine, works, in order that you can start to see your daily life through the lens of Ayurveda and how beautiful and how impactful it can be. In the things you're already doing. You don't have to turn your life upside down in order for those three pillars to be applied. So let me just pause now and see if anyone has any questions at all. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or pop a question in the chat. I'd love to answer some questions. You can ask me about something we've already covered, or if you've got something else that you'd like me to talk about that we haven't covered today, I'm also really happy to answer questions more broadly. For those of you who had studied a little Ayurveda before, those of you who are ones and twos, I'm interested to know if the teachings I shared with you today are things that align with what you've studied before. Is it a little bit different? How did it land for you compared to your previous studies? I'd love to hear about that. Catherine. Oh, you unmuted and then you muted again. Did you want to say something? Oh, great refresher. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sometimes we need to hear things several times, many times, for them to really land. So I'm glad.
Thank you.
Moki says a good starting point. Good. That's beautiful. Thank you. Sandra, did you want to ask something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just don't just how do you just practice this in daily life? Is it just through breathing or through mostly. I know I understand sadhana, shakti. I wrote down some notes, and swaha means to let go, just surrender. If things aren't going well in life, or if you're having a bad experience in something, just let it go and move on. I understand that. So I understand shakti as a way of living, and sadhana. These are just all three pillars that you can just implement in your daily life.
Absolutely. And you can apply them to almost anything. You can apply them to your physical health. You can apply them to your mental health. You can apply them to your relationships with, you know, kids, partner, elderly parents. Like they're relevant. They're very overarching concepts. And what I would say, if you're thinking about making changes in your lifestyle, like if there's things that you want to do because, for example, you're wanting to improve your health, let's say, the way I recommend doing this is to take one thing at a time. What a lot of people do is they create a whole regimen for themselves and try to change everything all at once. You know, I'm going to improve my sleep and I'm going to start exercising and I'm going to change my diet and I'm going to heal my relationship and etc., 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 clean my house and declutter. And you do it for 3 or 4 days and then you've created such a full-on and rigid program for yourself that of course it's very hard to stick to. So I love the idea of micro habits, meaning we just change 1 or 2 small things and then we add something. Like, so for example, let's say you're drinking 4 cups of coffee a day and you'd like to reduce how much coffee you're drinking. Instead of just going cold turkey and completely stop drinking coffee, maybe you first cut out 1. You go down to 3 a day and you do that for a week. And then you think, okay, I could maybe cut out a 2nd cup. And then you're down to 2. And you do that for a week or a couple of weeks. And then the trick is that you stick with that for a while, okay? Before you keep cutting and cutting and cutting, first of all, you get into the groove of, I'm now recalibrated to, I only have 2 cups of coffee a day. And then maybe you drop 1 and possibly you don't go to nothing. Because if you love coffee and you really enjoy it and it's part of your life, then why not have 1 a day? 4 a day, okay, we can see there's going to be some health concerns there. That's not the best. But 1, like, it's not about just stripping away all the pleasure and all the joy. It's about moderation. I love the teachings of middle path. So choosing 1 area, working with micro habits, working slowly over time. And then once you've nailed 1 area, then you start to look at, okay, what's next? You know, for example, if I was working with somebody, which I've done a few times, who was transitioning towards vegetarian diet, I wouldn't usually recommend they go completely vegetarian overnight. I would say, okay, let's first of all cut out chicken and fish. And then maybe let's first of all cut out red meat, but we still have chicken and fish. And then maybe we cut out the chicken. And then finally the fish. And that might take quite a long time. If you're cutting dairy, I mean, I'm just making these examples up. It's whatever might be relevant for you. But let's say you had to cut dairy out of your diet for whatever reason. You've got a lot of kapha in the system, a lot of mucus, a lot of congestion. Usually the recommendation there would be to reduce dairy. So if you're someone who eats a lot of dairy, we'll look at what would be the easiest thing for me to cut out first. If I usually have a cheese sandwich, could I make it into a Vegemite sandwich? You know, and then you cut out 1 thing, the next thing, and slowly you create sustainable change that feels manageable. Your neural pathways in your brain take time to reconfigure. If you just scramble them by changing everything in one go, they go, oh no, I don't like this, go back to how it was before, because they're pretty established.
Yeah, because I'm trying to lose weight. So
yes.
I will practice this. I will, because I'm trying to lose weight, and that's a good thing for me to do, to take that into consideration. I'll take a smaller portion.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
I'll think about eating more slowly, just not gobble everything down. You know, just be more conscious of my habits.
Yeah,
that's been very helpful, actually. Yes,
I'm so pleased. Thank you. That's really great. And yeah, just be slow and steady, because then your brain chemistry, especially with food, because we have so much association with emotions and joy and pleasure with food, your brain chemistry starts to create new pathways and says, okay, this is the new normal now. Where I used to have 2 sandwiches, now I only have 1, and that's become normal. In Sanskrit, in Ayurvedic teaching, we call it samskara, which it means repeated pattern. There's usually, most of us has lots of samskaras in a day, things that we do again and again, and most of them are subconscious. Like, you don't even know that you have special ways of doing things, but you do. We all do. If you go and stay with a friend, or you go and stay with someone else, like even could be family, and then you see their little habits and routines, and you notice, oh, okay, they do things a little bit differently to how I do, right? And so what we do is we repattern those what modern psychology would call neural pathways, what Sanskrit or ancient wisdom calls samskaras. It's really the same thing, an indentation that gets fixed in us because we do things the same way always. A good example can be, most people either have the habit of having a shower when they wake up or when they go to bed at night. Some people do both, but you know, when I look at my kids, my older kids, 2 of my sons always like to have a shower before bed. They like to go to bed feeling clean, and 2 of them always in the morning. Just different, right? So it's like little habits, and then we look at those habits, we become conscious of them, we go, oh, okay, maybe, I mean, a common one is like 3 o'clock in the afternoon when your blood sugar drops, that'll be snack time, or like candy bar time, or donut time. It's like, okay, I'm noticing at 3 o'clock every day this tends to happen. What could I have a handful of nuts instead? Could I have a healthy smoothie instead?
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
And you start with that one thing, and then you build up on it.
Okay. Been very, thank you. That was very helpful.
I'm really glad. And let me know how you go with it. I would love to hear.
Okay.
Linda is saying that she starts with a glass of water each day first thing, instead of boiling the kettle for tea or coffee. Yes. And something you could do, Linda, which Ayurveda loves, is pop some ginger in that, or lemon, or both, in that water, because that really kickstarts your digestive fire. So a little bit of ginger or a little bit of lemon in the we call it morning water, before anything else. Let that come into your tummy first, and have the water not too cold, and then your digestive fire will be instantly ignited, and that will really help with your Agni, or your digestion, throughout the day. Any other questions from anyone? It's been really beautiful to spend this time with you. I'm so grateful for those of you who are able to join me live, and also for those of you watching and listening to the replay. I know that some of you will be continuing the journey with me, and I really look forward to that. And for those of you who aren't, I'm just so glad that you've been able to spend this time with me and be part of my community. If you do have questions, sometimes I know people can be on calls like this and don't want to ask a question publicly, and I totally understand that. If you feel a little more private, please don't hesitate to email me. I'd be so happy to receive an email from you, and I will definitely get back to you individually and give you some support and some resources and some advice. So if you did have a question but you didn't feel confident to ask it in the webinar, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm going to end with just a very brief yogic prayer or yogic blessing. So if I can just ask you to close your eyes down just for a moment. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, the words, and the actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.